Hey everyone, it's Tiffany with Little House Online, and I am here with legendary writer J.M. DeMatteis.
Well said.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time out to talk with us. How have you been enjoying the con so far?
It's been great, although what I've seen is how much this show has grown. You know, I first came here maybe 6 years ago, and it's this it felt small, big enough, but we're still small and intimate, and today it was like, holy moly, it's like really exploding.
Yeah.
Really big. I was here 2 years ago, and even in the past 2 years, it's gotten even bigger, and now I hear that next year it's going to be 3 days.
Wow.
Yeah. So.
Wow, yeah, that'll be a really big difference, and this is actually the first year I've seen a line wrap around the building for getting in.
I looked out the hotel window and was like, oh my god, that's a lot of people.
What happened? Who told?
And why aren't they all buying comic books? You know?
Exactly. So how do you feel that this show relates to like the larger shows like New York Comic Con or San Diego Comic Con?
What I like about this, and I always say the same line to everybody because it's true.
Okay.
There's no movie stars, there's no wrestlers, there's no porn stars, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just comic book fans and comic book creators, and that's it.
Yeah.
The only Hollywood person I've ever seen was one of the actors on 30 Rock the first year I was here.
Oh, really?
And he was just here as a fan. He was just walking around talking to people and getting, you know what I mean? So that's the closest to Hollywood this place has ever gotten. You know? So it's great. I like that it's just people that really love comics and the people that create them.
This is for like the true fans who...
Yeah. And even though it's gotten bigger, it has yet to reach the point where it's too big.
Yeah.
I was at New York Comic Con last year just for a day. And at one point I walked out into the hall and I looked at this mass and I said, it's time to go. I have a hard time with crowds.
Yeah.
Them too, and when I was there the first year of New York Comic Con, and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's a weird thing because, I mean, comics are doing well now, but if you look at the people that are coming to these conventions, it's not just people that are buying comic books, for sure, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think in this day and age, you can be a huge fan of these characters and watch the movies and play the video games and watch the animated shows and the live-action TV series and never read a comic. And it's just kind of a sad thing.
It is, because they have no idea where it came from.
Right.
Like people of a certain generation are just like, oh no, well, that's just from the movie. And it's like, that's
and you can get your fix very easily without ever reading a comic book.
Yeah, and you miss out on the true storytelling. Yeah. Which was a great segue into my next question.
Okay.
You were an accomplished storyteller. What made you want to tell stories? What made you want to be a writer?
You know, I was always creative. As a kid, I used to draw all the time. I was a musician. I still am. I play, I write songs, I sing.
That's awesome.
And, when I was little, I wanted to draw comics. And it's too long a tale. It didn't pan out. I was supposed to go to art school. It didn't happen, blah, 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 blah. But I got fascinated with writing as well. I was just always looking for that form of creative expression. And I started as a journalist, a rock music journalist.
Oh, wow.
And then transitioned into comics. And somehow here I am.
That's
and
amazing.
30 years went by and here I am. You know?
That's amazing. You're into like serialized fiction.
Yeah.
What about that style of story kind of draws you to it? Like, what makes you want that instead of doing journalism instead?
You know what? Well, for me, the problem with journalism, especially because I was reviewing, is that you essentially have to be an opinionated asshole.
Right.
And I really love reading reviews. I really respect really smart, opinionated assholes. But that's what you have to be.
Yeah.
And, and I decided at one point that I would rather be the guy creating new work and being criticized than the person doing the criticizing.
Yeah, like delving out judgment. Yeah.
I didn't feel good about it. I did a review in Rolling Stone of a Grateful Dead album.
Okay.
And I was a little smug about it at the time. I wouldn't do it now, but I was young and smug. And I got all this mail that Rolling Stone sent me from all these Grateful Dead fans are like comic book fans. They are like diehard. And it was as if I had written something terrible about your mother. Why did you say that? And I felt awful. I don't have a heart for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
In my private life, I'm an opinionated asshole.
Right.
Take me to the movies, I won't shut up and complain. But I don't want to do that in a public forum. I want to respect people's work. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I would much rather be creating. Once I got involved in writing, there's nothing better. And it fits my nature. I like to sit in a room by myself with my imaginary friends and create things that didn't exist 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
That makes me happy.
That's amazing. I know you have a YA book out.
Called Imaginalis.
Thank you. I was like, I got the name right, your last name right. I'm going to let you take the lead on that one.
I like to write things that you can't pronounce. Before that, I did a book called Abadazad that nobody can pronounce either.
There you go. It was very hard to ask for it in the bookstores. Like, I want...
People are like, Abadazad, you know? So the next book I write, I'm going to find a very simple title.
There you go. But it has like a supernatural.
It was fantasy, yeah.
There you go.
It was It wasn't supernatural per se. It was fantasy. It was about a girl. Actually, I had done Abadazad, which started as a comic book, then moved on and became a book series for Hyperion Books.
Okay.
And then, because of a lot of stuff, that again, it's a long story, the book series got killed after like 3 books.
Oh wow.
Which was really, I don't know if I've ever been more devastated in my career than when I lost that series, because I really poured heart and soul into that. So, but out of that came the idea for Imaginalis, which is about a girl whose favorite book series gets canceled.
Oh my gosh, okay.
And she starts getting text messages and video messages from the characters in the books. So she essentially has to find the author of this canceled book series, and between the two of them find a way to save these characters who are trapped in a kind of limbo.
That's awesome.
So it was a way to work out my grief about Abadazad, really.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of fun.
So when you're starting out writing a comic book, as opposed to starting out writing a book, what kind of approach, what changes about how your mindset is, or?
You know, I've written for television, I've written for film, I've written novels, and I've written a ton of comics, and story is story.
Okay.
What changes is the form. You know, writing a screenplay, I just finished a script for an animated feature. There's a certain form, and in the beginning you're so obsessed with the form that you have to learn the form, but once you get the form down, story is story, you know, and to me the essence of writing in any of those media is just like let the story take over. The more the story takes over, the more I'm not there with quotations around the I, the more I get out of the way and let the story happen, the better it is. And whether it expresses itself through a screenplay or a comic book or a novel or whatever, or an episode of a TV show, it doesn't matter. I get engaged with the story comes alive, and off we go. And that's when I know I'm cooking. When things happen on the page that surprise me that I didn't plan or expect.
Yeah. Wow. As a complete non-writer, like that, the craft of writing is a mystery to me, and like when I read
it is a mystery. I've been doing it for 30 years and it's still a mystery, and that's why I love it. The short version of a very long story, when I was working on Abadazad, I was working on the 3rd issue of the comic book, had it all mapped out, knew exactly who was in it, exactly what I was going to do, and I literally sat down to type, and as I typed, the name of a character I'd never heard of appeared on the screen in front of me.
Oh my gosh.
Until I typed the character's name. I have tons of notes, never heard of this character. I write this little bit with the character, but I have this other story I want to tell. And the issue is just falling apart. It just sucks. It's horrible.
Okay.
Until I realized that this character that I'd never heard of needed to be in that story. I threw out a whole other group of characters that I'd planned on, brought this character in, and off it went. And it was perfect. Now, I didn't create that character. It just appeared. And so when it really is cooking, it feels like to me like these stories already exist somewhere. And someone, I always imagine like an old-fashioned teletype machine, and they're going, and they're like beaming these stories into my head. And so the more surprised I am by things like that, the more I know that I'm hooked in to whatever it is, like out there in the great ultimate collective unconscious or another dimension or whatever it is. And I'm just lucky enough to be the guy that they picked to tell that story.
I like that way of thinking about that, because that just brings that extra element of just like amazing.
And there's always a cosmic mystery to it, and no matter how long I do it, there's always a level where it's a mystery. But the real creative act comes from a place of mystery, and I always want it to be that way. I don't ever want it to be so planned out that I know everything I'm going to do.
Nothing overworked, nothing where you're forcing it.
I want the spontaneity and the magic.
It's that kind of writing is like my favorite kind of writing to read. That kind of writing where I come away from like, wow, where did this come from? Like, how could you have thought of that? Like then I try to sit there and I try and like figure it out backwards. I'm like, I have no idea. I couldn't even comprehend where this came from, because it just came from.
And the best part is if I can say the same thing about my own story.
That's awesome. So I want to talk to you a little bit about comics, if that's cool. So back in the 90s, Spectacular SpiderMan with Sal Buscema, who was here earlier. Those comics kind of struck people as like cerebral in a way. Like Spider-Man was often mirrored by spiritual or psychological struggle. Was that like your initial, was that what you were just trying to do when you started out, or did it just happen?
It's the way I approach story. It's just the way I approach story. I'm fascinated by the bigger spiritual mysteries, and I'm fascinated by the mysteries in our own head, and they kind of mirror each other. You know?
Right.
So I will always come at the characters from a psychological place. I don't usually come from plot. I come from emotion and psychological backstory, and I call it the big why. Why is this person acting this way? Why did this guy put on a weird costume and decide he wants to take over the world? You know?
Right.
And especially in the Spectacular Spider-Man stuff, you had Harry Osborn and Peter Parker, two guys who were best friends and yet ultimate enemies.
Yeah.
And you know, they were both really, really damaged people, and it was just like, it was so ripe for exploration. So I will always come at the character psychologically or spiritually. That's just what fascinates me.
Instead of just being told, well, no, that's just how they act. Like someone wrote that once, so that's how you have to do it. Like
and you know, some people think from plot first, and then, oh, here's a great idea for plot, and that will happen. But the first thing I'm going to look at is who are you, and then why are you?
Right.
And so many of these characters have been around for years and years and years, and yet the why has never been asked.
Yeah.
And that's where you can always find a new way into the story. There's a limitation sometimes in how far in this direction you can go in changing these characters, because it's an existing universe that will be there long after you're gone. But there's always room to go deeper.
Right.
So even though you're in a sort of a cage this way, you can keep drilling down into their psyches, and there's always some new corner of the psyche that you can find that will make these characters more interesting.
Approaching it from that angle instead of just approaching it from the, well, look, when the character was created, it said that they acted like this, blah, like, you know, that's how it's going to be. Adds that extra depth and honestly, like, a believability. Like, it's almost, you can relate to it a little bit more because you're like, man, like, I've had experiences, maybe not exactly like that, but like something that's similar that made me react to someone this way, but I can trace back to this moment in time. And putting that in, honestly, makes just a little bit more, like, real.
And the more of yourself you can put into the characters that way, the more reality and the more it will hook a reader, whether they realize it consciously or not. You know, I've done autobiographical comics, but I've also put things into Spider-Man comics that were deeply, profoundly personal. The readers don't know that.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you know, you have to. I always say, as a writer, you have to be shameless.
Yeah.
You have to be able to dig into your own psyche and pull out things that you wouldn't even tell your best friend necessarily.
Right.
But you have to be able to put it on the page.
Put it on the page, yeah. And it all, you know, like you mentioned before, like getting through having, you know, the series stopped and like working through it to make a new book. It's like it's therapy, and being able to put those like innermost things that you may not tell anyone into something where no one else may know about it.
Right.
Again, it not only helps you, but it brings the character to life at the same time. It's just this great like symbiotic relationship. So I know you won an Eisner for your work on Super Buddies, formerly known as the Justice League.
Formerly known as the Justice League, yeah.
It was like a really lighthearted, old-school approach to the DCU. Do you feel that there is a way for comics in general to get back to telling stories that everyone can enjoy, no matter what the age?
There's a couple of things folded in there. I don't know if our Justice League stuff was necessarily all ages. I think probably kids could respond to it because there was humor in it, you know? But we also sort of, you know, there were elements in there that maybe an 8-year-old wouldn't want to read, you know, in the joke. But that said, all ages comics have been a passion of mine for years. That's how Abadazad started out. I wanted a comic that I could read to my daughter, and I would get the stuff from Marvel or DC, and I'd look through this stuff and say, I'm not giving this to a kid.
Yeah.
Maybe really great stuff, really well crafted and well written, but not kid suitable.
Right.
And I think a lot of times the approach to kids comics is, well, we'll just do an adaptation of a Cartoon Network show. But that's not what I wanted to do. Say with Abadazad was to do the equivalent of really excellent children's literature. Yeah. Because the best children's books appeal, you know, as a parent, when you sit down with a great kid's book and you read it to your kid, you're enjoying it as much as your child is. And there's an opportunity to explore very mature themes. You just do it in a different way.
Right.
And it took years and years ago, I had sold a project to DC called The Stardust Kid, started working on it, and then I realized the market wouldn't support it. So I actually bought it back. It took like 20 years, and then we finally did. I did it for Boom Studios a few years ago. But I think it's so important to be able to bring in kids to comics, you know? That's one of the things that a lot of the animated shows have done very well. I wrote a lot for Batman the Brave and the Bold, that series. And I heard again and again from people, oh, I sit down with my 7-year-old and the two of us watch it and we both love it. And that's a real skill to sell a story that works on both those levels. And you know, you read Harry Potter with the kid, well, you're loving it as much as your kid. You know, Winnie. I remember when I read Winnie the Pooh. to my daughter. And Winnie the Pooh is written for a much younger audience, and yet A.A. Milne, the writing is so sophisticated and so sharp that I loved it as much as she did.
Right.
And so that's really, if I was going to pick for myself the dream job in comics, even to this day, would be to edit a line of kid comics. But what really, I always say the kids version of the Vertigo line, meaning really, really beautifully written, beautifully illustrated stories, but aimed at children and their parents.
Right, more story driven, because like you said, like a lot of times they do they're like, we need to make some comics for Free Comic Book Day or for whatever, but it just seems like they're just really washed out and there's not much to it, and they're just like, no, if we just throw bright colors at the kids.
You can do comics for kids that have real literary value.
Absolutely.
And real artistic value, and that's what obsesses me to this day. If someone came along and said, here's your new job, you're going to get to do that, I would say,
done.
Yes, sign me up.
Yeah, exactly.
Sign me up.
Well, because they really should. I really hope that the bigger companies get into that, because that's what's going to bring in the new readers, is to get them in.
I have pitched that over the years to just about every company. So let's do a line of really smart, literate kids comics, and for one reason or another, no one ever wants to do it.
I think they're probably afraid. They're just may not work, or maybe they look at the sales.
You have to take risks.
Exactly.
And I always say, get it in the bookstores where that's the material that sells more than anything.
Yes, get it on. Put it in the Barnes & Noble kids section on one of those round racks. Let them spin the rack full of they want off. Done.
Exactly.
The Spectre character.
Okay.
For a lot of readers, it turned out to be a really organic way to include Hal Jordan.
A lot of people hated it.
Well, for the people that I know, it really does work. And honestly,
a fascinating thing. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and honestly, I heard a few people talking around your booth about the Spectre and how they liked it. They loved it.
I was fascinated by that too, because when that book came out, all I heard was negative chatter, and I understand why. People wanted Hal Jordan to be Green Lantern. They didn't want him to be the Spectre. People that were fans of the Spectre wanted the old Spectre, who would turn into a giant cheese grater and grate the bad guys to death.
Right, okay.
This was a story about redemption, and the Spectre evolved from the spirit of vengeance into the spirit of redemption.
Yes.
And it was a very spiritual story. It was a very psychological story. At that time, it was a vehicle that really allowed me. There were some issues of the Spectre where I said really as much about my thoughts about life, the universe, and everything as I could have said if I'd written a 1,000-page novel. I really had the freedom to write the stories I wanted to write that really reflected my beliefs. But at the time, all I heard was the negativity.
Oh, right.
As the years have passed, and today, for some weird reason, 5 people came up to talk about the Spectre and how much it meant to them.
Oh.
So that really means something to me.
Absolutely.
Whether it's sold, then I don't care. But that it, I write first and foremost for myself, and then I write to touch people. I want to send that dart into somebody's heart and have it affect them the way the books that meant something to me affected me. So to have people come up and say that, I read that, and it opened the world of spirituality up to me in a way I never thought about before. So I went out and I read this, or I explored that, and that's great. You can't ask for anything more.
No, absolutely.
If you hit just one heart with one story, that's a great thing.
Yeah.
And if you can do that multiple times, then you're blessed.
It always helps to hear that more than hearing just the bad stuff.
And those are the things I enjoy about coming to these conventions. I don't usually do a lot of them. For some reason, this year I've done a lot of them.
Really?
But people come up, and you sit in a room by yourself, and you don't always know what effect your stories had. And someone comes up and said, "This changed my life."
Yeah.
Like I said, one person says that to you, you're good for a year.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's why I write. I really want to affect people and touch them and move them.
Absolutely. You wrote a book for IDW called The Life and Times of Savory 28. What inspiration and what drive was there for you to tell this story?
Savory 28 actually started. It took 25 years for this story to get out into the world. Literally. I always say to people, stories have timings of their own and lives of their own.
Right.
This is like the ultimate example. It took 25 years because it started as a Captain America story.
Okay.
Back in the 80s, I wrote Captain America, and I brought the character to a point where it seemed like the natural thing after this massive storyline that I'd done would be for him to actually, because he was of anyone in the Marvel Universe, the guy that had been doing this the longest. And he was a really smart, sensitive guy. Maybe it was time for him to question what he does. I love these characters, I love these universes, But there is a level where these stories boil down to two guys in costumes beating the crap out of each other, and you put that out month after month, and what that says is, here is how we get solutions to our problems.
Gotcha.
Ultimately, no matter how much philosophy you layer over that, it's about dropping a house on the bad guy's head. You know what I mean?
That's the root.
And that's the part that's always kind of gnawed at me and bothered me.
Okay.
So I had this Captain America idea where he was going to really start to question that, and I pitched it was a fairly radical idea for its day, that he was going to throw away the shield, walk away from violence, and it was going to piss off everybody else in the Marvel universe. And it was a pretty cool story that was going to end with his assassination. This was like 20 years before they did the assassination of Captain America. My editor went for it, the editor-in-chief at the time, which I understand his reasoning. At the time I was really pissed off, but over the years, like, I completely understand.
Right, you look back on it,
It's fine. I have no issues with it. But he said, no, we can't do this. This is not my vision of Captain America. We wouldn't do this. So I noodled with that story for 25 years.
Right, okay.
I turned it into my own character. I pitched it here, I pitched that, and no one ever quite got it.
Okay.
And so 25 years goes by, and I have a buddy named Mike Cavallero, a wonderful artist, and he sent me some of his recent art, and I said, oh my God, this is perfect for Savior 28.
Right, okay.
You want to do it? I sent him the outline. I said, this is great, I want to do it. I sent it to Chris Ryle at IDW.
Okay.
It's the only time it's ever happened to me. I sent it to them in the morning. That afternoon I got an approval, and they said, let's do it. Wow. So it took me 25 years to get approved. In one day.
In one day, yeah.
But in the end, by letting it be my own character, I wasn't stuck in anybody else's universe.
Right.
So we could tear anything down that we wanted to tear down. The main character could be an alcoholic. He could be anything you wanted him to be.
Right.
And you could, and so it ended up being much better. And in those 25 years, what had happened is we had just gone through the Bush years.
Right.
Obama had just been elected. We'd just been through this horrendous chapter, from my perspective, in our modern history. And so it worked even better than setting it against the Reagan years, which is what it was originally set against.
Okay.
So it allowed me to really express all the questions and doubts and objections that I've had to the superhero genre. At the same time, all the things that I loved about it too, because you have to love these characters to be able to write a story like that.
Right.
You can't write from a place where you're looking down on them or spitting on them or hating them. So I'm as proud of that story as just about anything I've done. And it really, doing it with Mike, it was like I had to wait for Mike to come along 25 years later.
Right. Well, in a way, it's like the story got the opportunity to age over time. And
it kind of goes back to what we were saying before. The story was in control. I wasn't. The story was waiting for, where's Mike Cavallero?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, he'll be around another 25 years. So
exactly. We're not going to let you know that, though.
And that's happened with a number of stories. Again, the timing is like, I'm like, please, I want to do it now. No, you can't do it now.
But that is, I think, what truly makes a storyteller a great storyteller is knowing when to listen to the story in a way, and knowing when to not just force it. Like I said, like, you can always tell when you're reading anything that was 100% forced. Like, they're like, I got to get this out right now.
Well, the story wouldn't let me force it. It just kept closing doors in my face until the time was right, and then the door went just instantly,
Yeah.
So it was. I'm very proud of that story. Very proud of that story.
One last thing, just something current that I know is coming up in October. It's Justice League 3000.
Actually, it's now been bumped to December.
Okay. I know you can't talk too much about it, but I guess I just want to talk about
I'll talk around it, but I can't.
All I want to know is just like what kind of tone you're going for.
Well, I'm co-writing with Keith Giffen, so there will be humor.
Okay, cool.
You will see the same sort of character-based stories that we've always done when we work together. There will be humor for sure, or else there's no reason for the two of us to do it, because when we work together, that's what we do. But it is set in a universe that is much darker, because it's the future, and it's sort of a post-apocalyptic future.
Okay.
So there's a lot of dark stuff going on, and against that setting are these characters. But I know there's been a lot of controversy, people trying to figure out what's going on with this book, and is it this, and is it that?
Nobody can wait.
And, this happened because they were told they have to do a dark book, and it can't be funny. The humorous tone is absolutely in there. But there's some dark shit that happens along the way.
But like, just to fans, just wait, just let it happen. It'll come out, and you'll get a chance to read it.
It's unfortunate, to say the least, that Kevin McGuire is not doing the book with us, because we were really, really looking forward to a long run and to working with. Because I would work with Kevin again, as I told him, in a heartbeat.
Right.
and whatever went on behind the scenes is not my thing to talk about.
Right. Nope.
Kevin to talk about or DC to talk about.
Absolutely.
So I'm really sorry about that. Howard Porter, who's doing the book now, is a phenomenal artist. And anything you've seen of his before, which is always excellent, the work he's doing now is off the charts. So we're very excited about the book. It's been difficult kind of wending our way through this little cavern to get here because of Kevin leaving. But take a deep breath, everybody. It's going to be a good book. I promise. Oh, I can't promise because who knows what anyone else's opinion.
Exactly.
It'll be a good book from my perspective.
There you go.
All I can say.
And that's all we can ask for. As long as you got to trust him, guys. You got to trust him. The man writes from the heart. And he knows how to craft a story. I gotta say, just on a personal note, I only recently, within the past 6 or so years, got into reading comics. And people have been giving me things, so I've been reading more modern stuff. And occasionally, I get handed stuff from the '90s, stuff like that. But the other way I hear them a lot is from our editor-in-chief Sal. He tells these stories that you have told as though they are legend or myth in a way. I hear these oral traditions of these stories, and he brought a book. He wanted me to see if I could get you to sign one of these books, and I was reading through it, and I was like, he told me this story, and he told me with such passion that there were points where I was like, I remember this 100%.
Wow.
So your stories have really influenced him, and to me as well, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what it was all about back then. So thank you so much for crafting these amazing stories that are great to honestly tell to a group of friends like that. I've seen him entertain an entire group of friends, telling stories, giving you full credit, of course, being J.M. DeMatteis told this story back then, and this is what happened in it. And
that's great.
Yeah.
Well, thank him for me.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us.
It's a pleasure. And thank you for having intelligent questions. You never know going in what the questions are going to be.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it could be who would win in a fight?
Okay, that's all right too. But I really appreciate well thought out, intelligent questions.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
No, it was an honor, and it was so much fun listening and talking with you. I'm Tiffany for Little House Online at Baltimore Comic Con, talking about J.M. DeMatteis, and make sure you check out Justice League 3000.
Yeah.
It was an absolute nightmare. It's just all it would have taken was one full fire alarm, and that would have been a riot.
And if you know about Feng Shui, the way they think.
Yeah.
This place has really bad Feng Shui. I'm getting out of here. Yeah.